I'm Lisa Bonise, and this is Mind Yourself. Welcome to part 3 of my conversation with author and adventurer in being, Elizabeth Ann Hill, as we discuss new ways of living in harmony with universal truth and all that is. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, we're back here with Elizabeth Ann Hill. She's talking about the interview with the universe, which she recorded with Glenna Dietrich, many, many years ago. Elizabeth, would you like to go ahead and give us maybe one or two more highlights, and then tell us where this led you? Where did you go with it?
Yeah, so this was kind of just the precursor to it all. But another highlight that I thought was very important was that all of the systems of the world have been created in separation. I mean, from education to healthcare to religion to politics, the economy, it's all based around this old idea of, there's not enough, we're all separate from each other, there's this world out there that's this finite world of separate beings, and it's all crumbling. It's all crumbling, and it's not going to be able to sustain. So it's important to let new ideas come in. And like I said before, we have all these innovations, people coming in. And it's funny because when I was in China, I was giving talks in China, and these people asked me there, what do you in the West have to teach us in the East here? And I thought that was an interesting question. And I said, well, in the East, it's the group. Very, very group oriented. In the West, it's the individual. And I feel like and the guides talked about, like, there needs to be a balance, because in China and places like that, they're not allowed to follow their heart. It's very control oriented. They're not allowed to follow their true calling, and they have to do what everybody else tells them. On the one hand, that's the negative, but the other way is that they're very community oriented, and they really are considerate of others. And then on the other side, we kind of have this rugged individualism. And so I don't want to use labels of conservative and liberal and all this, but if you think about it, like, on one side, you have rugged individualism, which is a beautiful thing. We left England and we came to the United States. We were pioneers. We were going to create a new world. We need that energy. People need to have the individual journey of their own. And as you become more awakened, you are a sovereign being and you have your own path, and no one should be telling you what you shouldn't be doing, right? Then it kind of fell over into fear and ego, where it was like, hey, I got mine. You loser. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's just, you don't need any handout. You don't need any help. And so it just kind of we lost the I am my brother's keeper. We lost the connectedness. So we took it a little too far. And then the other side would be, the guide said, you're not going to need so many controls any longer once people start to awaken. And Abraham Hicks talks about this, every single law that was created on this planet was created, they call it, in the vortex and out of the vortex. It's created out of the vortex. So adding more laws and more controls is absolutely the wrong direction. The guide said that will not sustain either. So, we have to have this middle ground of, yes, there needs to be a community where we help each other, we rely on each other. That's what we're here to do, but at the same time, we have to have that rugged, individual journey, because we are here to have individual journeys. So it's kind of like has to be a balance between those two, I think, in order to go forward. And I think community is actually the only way forward in this planet. Going back to, I've been to so many, I'm in a community right now, so many communities, and watching what works and what doesn't work. And I really feel that that's the way forward. So we kind of have to have this balance between these two kind of ways of thinking. And they're not really opposites. They're just kind of in a circle, the guide said. But the guides had told me the most fair way is people governing themselves. Like people coming together as a community and coming up with their own government. He said, you as a collective are going to have to decide how this is going to happen. And maybe some of the old ways will still work, but you're going to have to decide how to make this where it's not separation oriented, and that it's community and it's loving while still valuing the individual. And so
Yeah. Well, it seems like money is what it all sort of boils down to, who has and who has not. What did the guides have to say about money?
Well, that was the whole crux of, not completely, but of my job, the job that I have on this planet, because everybody, they said all the energy around money, it's about fear, it's about lack, it's about greed, it's about control, shame, guilt, anything you can think of that's the lowest energy. And they said there's no way that we can move into the new energies and this new shift in consciousness with this going on. So my job was to really learn, where does my supply come from? Where does it actually come from? And learn about, about what I need and want. Where does it actually come from? Is it in something that's in the world? Because that's what I learned. It doesn't come from the world. It might come through a job, through a person, through a government, through whatever way you are open to receive. It's going to come through that. But you have to understand that it comes from your own higher self, the infinite part of yourself. That's because it's energy first, and then it comes into form. So the money, we can't, everything is about money. I mean, you look at all the things that are going on this planet, it all comes down to money, and it's all about lack, and it's all about separation. So no, and the guide said some people took on paths kind of like me, where they would go through time periods with no money at all or very little money, and this was not a mistake, because they wanted to learn what was true. And I have so many ways in which what I need comes into me, and often it's not money. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. The whole journey was every day practically something different, so that it showed me it's not, if you don't have a job or you don't have these very narrow range of things, then you're in big trouble, and that's just not the true. It's just
And you were sort of launched onto this path without really being aware that that's what was happening. You mentioned earlier how you tried to find employment. You'd sent out resumes, and you would either not get a call back, or you would get the job and it would fall apart there, no matter what and I remember this. You and I have known each other for a lot of years, and I remember this incredible struggle you were going through of going, I can't support myself. I can't get a job. What am I to do? And so the universe just sort of booted you into it. And
it was kind of terrifying, but I started to see that every time I would be down to nothing, over and over and over again, and then something would show up, and it was not something that I could go and find. It found me. And that's, as we go into the rest, we can move now into the story part, back into the kind of the story part of it. I can talk about that, how it just became such a clear understanding that there is this infinite intelligence that is the universe, and it's part of me. It's not like something outside of myself, and it guides you, it directs you, it clothes you, it feeds you, and you just have to be, it's just, you work with your energy, and you listen, and you pay attention, and then you will be guided each step of the way. So you don't have to jump off a cliff without a parachute. You'll be guided. And a lot of people are having that feeling like, what, do I have to jump off a cliff without a parachute? It's like, no, it's just this time frame that we're in, that is why this is the way that it is.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and start telling us about how this segment of your life, because this is a completely different path than you ever thought you'd be on. Tell us about how this began.
Well, I was in San Diego. I came back from doing the interview with the universe with Glenna. And like I said, my father's estate had settled. And so for 6 months, I lived in this amazing place right near the beach in Encinitas, California, which is northern San Diego County, right on the ocean. And then we were having now and again channelings with these guides. And then the day came where all the money was gone, and I couldn't pay my rent. And I was just sitting on my bed in a fetal position, just absolutely terrified. I thought, is this what's going to be? I'm going to be homeless. Is that what these guides are talking about? But I knew, no, there's something else. And so I kept asking for guidance. And the only thing that kept coming was in my mind's eye, I could see this woman who had asked me to come counsel her daughter, because her daughter's friend had committed suicide, and she knew that she had read my Twin Souls book, and she knew that I had an experience with all of this. And that was the only thing that kept coming to go. And I didn't have money, and I didn't have food. I hardly had gas in my car. Call it petrol here in England. And so I said, fine, there's nothing else is coming to me. So I got in the car, drove 40 minutes away, just enough gas to get there, and counseled the daughter. And then while I was there, her friends were there because she just had surgery. And so they fed me lunch. And then I had been carrying my Twin Souls books around with me in the car, and a bunch of people there were there helping her because she just had surgery. They all bought books. So then I had money for the day. And then one of the women, I was kind of telling them what was going on. And she said, oh, well, I'm going out of the country. I need a pet sitter. Move in with me. It was like all in one day. I was so terrified. And then it just, boom. And I said, well, I need a place right away, because she wasn't going right away. And she said, oh, no problem. I have an office. We'll just set you up. So boom, I was out of that was the last time I had like my own place. It was really hard to leave that place, but I went down to like almost no possessions, and I lived at her house for a while and took care of her lovely, beautiful animals. And it was just an amazing experience. And that's kind of how it all started. And then I was jumping around with different friends. I went to San Francisco to stay with a friend. And my friend in San Francisco was very, very worried. You have to do something, Elizabeth. You have to do something. I mean, you're going to be homeless. And I just said, I don't know. I kept saying, I didn't know why I was saying it, but I kept saying, I'm going to get a phone call. I'm going to get a phone call. Don't worry. And then one day the phone call came, and it was this man. Remember when we went to the conference in Tennessee? If you remember that man, that he was building a healing center in Tennessee, and he called me out of the blue and said, oh, what's going on with you? And I told him what was going on. And he said, well, I'm building this healing center, and, why don't you come? And I asked him the name of the town, and he said it was Elizabethton, Tennessee. So that was my cue. And he said there was a little car there that I could use. And so I knew I needed to sell my car. And so it was just so funny, because I flew back to San Diego from San Francisco. I had $6 to my name. And my friend, I've stayed with this woman several times. She was the one with the daughter that I counseled. I stayed with her. She fed me while I was staying with her. And I took the $6 and I bought a $6 car wash, put my car on Craigslist. And I had this premonition. This was a Thursday. By Sunday, the car will sell. And by Tuesday, I'll be on the plane to Tennessee. And that exact thing happened. On Sunday, someone came, bought the car. I had to pay everybody off because I owe some people money. And I left San Diego with $100 in my pocket and flew to Tennessee. And that's kind of like, I lived in this, it was out in the country. There was like nobody, that I didn't know anybody. That was where I did try to get a job, and it just completely fell flat. But I would be down to nothing all the time. And then something would happen. A neighbor would knock on the door and say, oh, we heard you were here. Here's a huge basket of food. And so it just, and then I would get an idea to go do something, and I'd do it, and that would bring in the money. And so it was just, that's where it really began to sink in that, this is what this is about, to understand that there is this safety net. It is our own self. It's not something up in the sky somewhere. It's like our own being knows what we need and knows what we want and knows how to get it. If we just become quiet and listen and pay attention, and we'll get the information and we'll know what to do. And so that's kind of where it started.
Okay.
And then
it just went on from there. You ended up overseas. Did you ever imagine that that's where this would lead you?
Well, I knew all my life I kind of had these visions of going over, especially England. I've named after 2 English queens, Elizabeth and Anne, and my sister was also Catherine Mary. So I've always had an affinity with England, and look, I'm in England for the 3rd time. And so, yeah, it was, one day someone just popped up, and who I knew from some group I was in, and they invited me to England. And so off I went to England. And so again, this whole thing went on for years, really. I was in Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, and every single day, every single week, practically, I would be down to no money. And, I'd already given up on trying to get a job because it just wasn't happening. And so all these different ways, would show up, and it's certain at about 3 or 4 or 5 maybe years into the journey, I started having people following, sending me PayPal gifts, and I didn't know who was when or anything. Had no control over anything. It would just come when it came. And so if there was money needed, I would go through these sections of time where like almost every single day some money would come in, or every other day, or if it didn't, then it would come some other way. And it was kind of like out of my control as an individual human. It was like I was letting my higher self step forward and lead. And so that's what it was about. It wasn't about not having money. It was about stepping back and allowing my higher self to lead me through this journey that I needed to, because it's all about freedom. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be free of limitation, all the limitations that we believe in this world. And I can tell you that it really has happened for me. And I'm still, it's only the beginning, but
yeah. And there were many times though that you were left really questioning, what the fuck? and things would happen in your life where you would be put into kind of scary situations.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you learned from the fact that this wasn't all sunshine and roses. There really were extremely difficult circumstances. You were on the other side of the world where you knew no one. You didn't know the language. You had no place to stay. You had no food. You were put in some really difficult situations.
Yes. Well, the guides had said to me, you are going to face some of the deepest fears of all of humanity. Okay, then. And they're your fears as an individual, but not just you as an individual. But you're doing this to transmute these things. And so what is the biggest fear? It's about survival and money and not having money is a big deal. The way you're treated when you don't have money is very, very different than the way you're treated when you do. I mean, look at when they talk about a celebrity, it's always about their net worth and how much money they make. And so when you go with nothing and people don't know why you're doing it, because I didn't go around, I couldn't really, half the people didn't even speak English as to why I was in that situation. And so I had to incur a lot of really not very loving treatment. And the guides had said, you're going to go into these kind of dark places to shine the bright light. But yeah, sometimes I was like, look, see that bridge over there? I'm going to jump off it because I can't it was so terrifying. And one of our big fears is about authority, outer authority. And I had to face all these issues about authority. Like here, my sister was a border patrol agent and I was guided repeatedly to overstay my visa in some countries. In some places, you don't want to overstay your visa. Like in Myanmar, no one overstays their visa 5 months in Myanmar, but I did. No one overstays their visa 5. It was always the number 5 in Hong Kong, which is China. And I did. But I was just following the guidance. And then I had to walk through being, all these crazy things. So it was very, but every single time I did it, it was like, I could almost feel like I was walking through smoke. Like the fear was just smoke, and then it would just go poof, gone, poof, gone. Nothing ever happened. Everything always worked out. And people were saying, oh my God, Elizabeth, you're scaring me to death. Stop this. Your journey is just scaring me. But I had stepped back. I had said, okay, I want freedom. I want to live the truth of who I am, and I want freedom, and I will step back and you lead the way. And I knew who was leading, and the guides had said, we're walking with you every step, and you could feel it. Some of the situations that I get into, I could never have gotten into them by myself, and I never could have gotten out of them by myself.
Right. Well, you also have a law enforcement background yourself. So you were a law-abiding citizen, and you're always very aware of the fact that these are the rules and this is what you're supposed to do. So when you would be approached by the local law enforcement, how would you deal with that?
Well, I had gotten to this point where, I just knew that the laws of the world are based in separation. So it really doesn't matter. I'm not suggesting that everyone should go breaking the law, but I didn't break laws that were like for safety, like stop at the stop sign or something. I was just like things about, this is our country and you can only, and that's not your country. And I knew that I can never be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I am guided. And so I would just I just had to have courage and I couldn't really speak the full truth to some of these people, but I would have to sometimes make up a story and say, well, I'm a writer, and I'd make up a story about not running out of money or something. And, but I learned so much by these experiences, because nothing could touch me. I mean, you could threaten me and you could do all kinds of things to me. I mean, there was absolutely amazing, miraculous, loving people. So it wasn't all that. It was kind of like a balance between these really intense experiences that were pretty scary, and some people who were really, really unconscious and asleep. And then these really, really loving people, and they would help me along. And so it's kind of like it's like the third dimension, the dark and light polarities. And the guide said that that's by embracing all, not just the light, but by embracing all of it and recognizing that's my own inner, I've incarnated many times. And so I've done these things before myself. And so it was because sometimes I had to really stand up for myself in a really powerful way verbally, but inside I was blessing the person and thanking them, because I couldn't see my own limitations often without that happening.
Right. And then it seemed like sometimes the scarier your circumstances, the bigger the miracle or synchronicity that would occur to help boost you into the next adventure.
One time I needed to have over $1,000. I needed over $1,000 to leave Myanmar, because I had racked up such a bill with guest houses. And because remember, my PayPal card was expired. And, those who are watching, Lisa is like she's just been my rock. I use her address. She would get my PayPal card for me and get it to me, but you couldn't send it to me because I was getting guidance. Don't have her send the card here to Myanmar. No. And so I had no way of receiving money, and I couldn't even receive money Western Union because my visa was expired and they were very rigid. And so I'm here. It's like this complete conundrum. And yet somehow I made it through all of that. And in one day I got over $1,000 in donations, and I had to then take that money, Western Union it to a person that I'd met in Myanmar. They had to then it was a huge stack of cash by Myanmar standards, give me the money. And then I had to try to go exchange it for US dollars, which was almost impossible. They didn't want their money back. It was, but I just kept walking. And then at the end of it, but after I go through these experiences, I could literally feel physical healing in my body. I could feel the shifting of these fears just dissipating. So yeah, but there was many loving, beautiful experiences. I kind of blessed all of it, because that was the point. The guide said, you need to bless it all, that we can't drop these polarities until you bless all of it, knowing that it's your own self that you're looking at, because you're part of the human collective. And so,
right. Wow.
Blessed.
So looking at the time here, that will end part 3. I think this would be a good place to go ahead and end. Once again, if you'd like to listen to the interview with the universe or read Twin Souls, you can go to Elizabeth's Facebook page at facebook.com/twinsouls444. And there is also a button there if you would like to donate via PayPal to her journey. And we'll be back next time, where we'll talk about what does all of this mean for those of you who are listening. This isn't just Elizabeth's story. This is our story. We'll be back soon.